Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo. The new set is coming out on Thursday, or the new mini set, mini bundle, whatever you want to call it. We have a bunch of new cards for Buried Memories to review, and we're going to be talking about all of the spoilers from that set so far. They did a really nice thing, and they actually released a bunch of like cool lore posts related to each of these cards, or at least all of the three-color cards. Kind of a little mini adventure type thing, similar to a campaign. They just sort of did like a story version of that, and I sort of mixed feelings about that. Definitely glad to see some more lore. Could have been cool to see a campaign as well, but at the same time, definitely get some information about Bastion, that kind of thing. I'd really like to see Bastion like a little better developed in general, so it's always nice to see some stuff about those cards. But we have a bunch of cool promo cards, and we also have some neat removal cards and other like sort of more specific things are going to be a bit more meta defining that we're going to be talking about as well. But first we're going to be talking about a cycle of legendaries, all in three colors, all with like lots of delightful stuff going on, starting with Dicro Conqueror, a flying charge 3/5 Valkyrie Warrior, which when Dicro attacks, each enemy unit gets -1/-1 until your next turn. I like that it is a warrior. It's clearly a Valkyrie soldier, but you can't have Valkyrie be soldiers. That just doesn't make sense. Yeah, in any case, warrior soldier, just like now an actual thing to make sure that you keep certain cards out of soldier tribal, but definition wise it's not like the end of the world. This card is not a soldier, but as a 3/5 this card has the ability to give -1/-1 until the end of your next turn, which is not like your standard decay type option, but does allow you to kill grenadins and other small units in one go, which is super nice. And if you give the card berserk or figure out some way to give it extra attacks, you can potentially kill more than that and sweep smaller boards completely with Dicro, assuming that you have some neat way to make an extra attack, which is not going to be terribly likely. But I think the card's ability to sort of like mess up certain options in the air is pretty interesting. Okay, so for 6, you get a flying charge unit with a decent stat line. 3 in the air is enough to provide, at the very least, a clock on your opponent. Like, this card will eventually kill them, and while it's attacking, it's going to make it harder for them to race you. So it does counter out some aggro. It will probably kill small aggro units, get a little bit of value. And then the charge ability actually does like sort of manifest as enough damage to potentially destroy your opponent or get the extra 3 health that you might need off of their life total. So as far as things go, I think I think Dicro is fulfilling their duty as far as like the kind of different things that they want to do, but they're not doing anything fantastically. They're not a particularly aggressive unit. They're not a particularly healthy unit. The charge ability is really nice, but doesn't really fit very well with their attack ability. The flying ability is really nice, but doesn't fit very well with their like defensive stat line. And the attacking ability is really, really good, but again, like they have kind of that defensive stat line, so oftentimes you're going to be like trying to hold back and block things like a 4/4 or something like that, and you're not going to be able to like get the best benefit of those -1/-1s. On the other hand, the card kills tokens, so it's pretty fun to pull out of the market. In 3 colors, I think this is asking for a little too much, but it's an interesting card and definitely does work really well in any sort of meta where tokens are just a little bit too crazy. The other thing that's kind of rough about this is that it is a -1/-1 effect, not like a -2/-2 or anything like that. And again, like the premier deck right now, or the premier deck last that I checked, was still Mandrakes. So like with them receiving a bunch of nerfs, they are still very, very healthy units that also have some good answers to flyers and some good just like sort of general, like you want more pressure in the air and you want like things that are like, you know, going to kill stickier units than this. So yeah, it's really, really interesting against grenadins, but grenadins like not necessarily the power cards of the format, and I think there's just better things to do in 3 colors. So not an amazing lead in, but a really fun like sort of signature legendary. Would have been really, really cool to play in like some sort of campaign set, I think. All right, next up we have, let us browse here. Oh, somehow we've ended up in the wrong folder. That's okay, we can fix that pretty easily. Just gotta find our spoiler folder. Hello, Eternal Art. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Okay, and then Buried Memories. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Next up we have, let's go with all of the ones from the particular set. I don't know if we reviewed Hephos Reach Captain previously, so we can talk about him as we go. Oh, that's why we were in the wrong folder. Cool. I think we might have talked about Hephos once before, but we'll do a quick review of him as well here, since this is a review of the 5 cards in this cycle. Hephos, reach captain, flying, amplify 2, stun an enemy unit, or play a +2/+2 weapon, or draw a random sigil from your deck. All useful things that you want to do at 3, so very, very useful card at 3, not an amazing card at 1, not that you're going to play it at 1 because it's a 3-color card, and a really interesting card at 5 for a bunch of different reasons. I think we have discussed Hephos previously, but this card does have like a decent amount of interesting options available, and as a flyer, like, provides with a lot of the different like stuff that you really want out of a card. Amongst other things, it is a 3/4 in the air for 3, which is quite a bit cheaper than Dicro's 3/5. I think that like this is definitely something that gives you quite a bit of like interesting tools, and can potentially get like the stun abilities for Soldier Amplify running, which is really, really relevant if you're trying to play with like Soldier Amplify cards, which is a lot of different fun effects. All right, next up we have Gran Iron Martyr. Gran is a 3-cost red, blue, purple 1/1 that can't block. It has Entomb, draw a card. Your other Grenadin get +1 strength permanently, and you increase the damage each spell in your hand by 1 permanently. So yeah, this is something where you can buff a bunch of your other Grenadin. It is a Grenadin and a Cultist simultaneously, which isn't super important, but matters for certain Cultist sacrifice type decks. Overall, a little bit underwhelming for a sacrifice card, but the Entomb draw a card ability is very nice. You do like this because of the draw a card ability, since it is functioning very similar to something like a Dark Wisp, except that Dark Wisp can, in fact, block. So this is a card that costs a little bit more, again has that 3-color atmosphere going on, so I believe that there's a chance we're going to see some like good 3-color fixing for this set, and if that's the case, then Gran becomes playable. But like basically what we're seeing right now is we're not really seeing a lot of stuff that you can play like with this. If there's, say, like a 3-color power that's just 3 influence of each type and depleted, then something like Gran becomes a lot more viable. If you're really digging for the influence to play this card so you can get sacrifice going on, then, you know, you've got some potential options. Alright, next up we have Eurid the Drifting Song, an 8/8 for 8 that says when Eurid attacks, your mandrakes get +1 strength, flying, endurance, and quick draw, with the Entomb ability of put 9 copies of Eurid into your deck. Has there ever been a more fun card for Crown of Possibilities? So yeah, this is a really, really interesting Mandrake / Bard, which is a hilarious type to be putting on the card, especially considering that the Bard type was only recently added as a result of like Jang Lee, and then like people sort of raised an outcry about cards that were not bards, and all of them have become bards since, but now we have a Mandrake Bard, the Drifting Song, which has this really nice Mandrake bonus ability that gives Mandrakes flying. Trying to make Mandrakes with flying a deck is definitely an interesting option. Eurid is too expensive to belong in like most of the standard Expedition Mandrake aggro, but Mandrake value decks can definitely potentially play this and get some interesting benefits out of it. Also notably, Eurid gets flying, endurance, and quick draw on itself, which means that it then has those abilities permanently as it is trying to get that whole Entomb thing off. If you play this card with Crown of Possibilities, you get the flying, endurance, and quick draw, and then you put copies of Eurid back into your deck. It has those 3 skills, it can't get them again, and it can get additional skills off of Crown that are more useful, which is super fun. I think that that's a pretty exciting concept, and also there's like some potential to maybe like give the card Destiny, and then like really get into some wild nonsense with Devour and a bunch of like sort of like unusual sacrifice cards. So as a Throne Crown of Possibilities deck, or potentially as like if there's some sort of change up in the meta where Crown of Possibilities becomes legal in Expedition again, this is a card that I wholeheartedly support. Very, very into that concept overall. As a larger Mandrake, I don't think it's really influencing the Mandrake benefits of any kind. Like, I think that like the Mandrakes are already in a pretty strong spot. Eurid does not really do anything for or against that. It's a little too expensive to be played in current Mandrake decks, so it's probably not something that's going to be doing a lot as far as that thing goes. So yeah, I think that like overall that's definitely a pretty interesting option. It's going to be pretty solid overall. The final one that we have is Volk the Autoforge. Volk is a two-parter, and there's Volk's Heart. So we start with Volk the Autoforge, and Endurance Overwhelm 5-3 for 3 with Entomb play Volk's Heart. Okay, so right away, really good stat line for 3. Worth the price of admission in terms of like the cost of the card. Fire Time and Justice is probably something that you're going to be able to play a little bit easier than some of the other colors because it's got Justice in there, so it's got fixing. Time also has good influence fixing, so if you're playing like a Trailmaker type setup, this is a card that actually plays down on 3 a little bit more frequently and has Endurance and Overwhelm, both of which are really, really great. 3 health is risky, but still pretty accessible, and with Torch not being like a fast spell anymore, you're going to be hitting with like Conflagrate, other things that are going to be pretty even on tempo with Volk as far as getting rid of the card goes. So, and then since it has the Entomb ability where you play Volk's Heart, pay 3 and sacrifice Volk's Heart and another relic to play Volk from the Void of +2/+2, this card can get bigger and scarier, which is kind of nice. A 7/5 for the cost of a relic is potentially not that great, but if you're doing it to an Amber Lock or an Emerald Overcharger or a Malaga Munitions, all of which will be very likely played in a Volk deck, then that's something where you basically just get a constantly expanding Autoforge that is going to be causing a lot of problems in Sentinels in 3 colors. So really, really neat stuff. It is also a Sentinel and an Explorer, which is a unit type that really hasn't existed previously. Sentinels Explorers have a lot of different synergies with each other, but Sentinel Explorer is not something that has existed at the same time. They have always been like a really unusual tribal pairing where this is something I think that Eternal does that may actually be unique to Eternal, is that Sentinels, Explorers, and Relics all have different like things matter. So building 3 different types is sort of how you have to go with that. But with Volk the Autoforge, you now have 2 types in one, and also you can play a Relic off of it, so it actually happens to occupy all 3 of those spaces in terms of like Sentinel, Explorer, Relic, Tribal, which, hey, cool stuff. You get free Relics to activate different Sentinel options, you get a free Explorer to activate other Sentinel options, anything that cares about Explorers, and you get a Sentinel to activate Explorer options. So yeah, all the different tribal stuff, that is pretty fun stuff. So really, really neat. Someone's pointing out that this card plays well with Killer and other types of effects. This is very true. This is a good recursive card that has really good options attached to it. Of the 5 cards that we have talked about so far, Dicro, I think this may actually be the strongest of it. Hephos is a little comparable, but like Hephos mostly provides flexibility, and Volk gives you just like a significant amount of power and is very likely to be, I think, a tier 1 expedition card. So really likely to see some support and very likely to push Sentinels into a place where you can do some cool stuff. The one thing about it that is not so good is that this is a card with Overwhelm and like sort of like pushing that sort of like aggressive Overwhelm strategy. That is a very powerful tactic, but regen cards have somewhat nullified the power of Overwhelm cards. They are no longer like quite as good as they have been previously. So these like really aggressive Overwhelm stat lines with really low health don't fly quite as well anymore, because a lot of regen cards can just block the card, kill it for free, and then get value without actually taking any Overwhelm damage. So that does neutralize some of Volk's particular benefits, particularly against like, again, regen stuff, mandrakes, that kind of thing. But the card is still super cool, and it plays in just about any format that doesn't have regen, as well as just being like very, very solid in formats with regen. And there are plenty of answers to regen, not only with Volk, but also like in Sentinels. Auto Tread is available, and there's a new card as well that we will be talking about. I believe it is called Flash Fry. And yeah, why don't we move into that next? Okay, so Flash Fry. Is that up? Nope. Try again. Flash Fry. Hi-ho. Deal 3 damage to a unit, give it Voidbound, it loses its regen and can't regenerate this turn. Normally you would say this unit loses regen and then deal the damage to it. I think this sort of like jives with like the way that regen is phrased in general, where the card is supposedly like coming back after being damaged. So like it kind of makes sense if you're just like trying to explain regen in like rules text, but regen in like a a ludic, in a way that like sort of makes like story sense as far as like regen goes, lore sense, I would say, something like that. If you're describing the action of regenerating, then Flash Fry makes sense. But if you were going to be like very rules-larry about it, I would actually like swap those lines and say that the thing loses its regen, can't regenerate, and then you deal 3 damage to it. I think either way, this card's going to work exactly as you expect it to, which is it's going to kill any unit with regen and give it Voidbound, which, yay, good stuff. Seems very, very solid. Obviously, the card can do some pretty ridiculous stuff, and it will kill a number of the cards that are really, really dangerous right now, including the Mandrake Merchant, which is a card that is actually a huge problem for red decks right now and has to be dealt with and can't really be dealt with currently under any good circumstances. This is a serious answer to regen cards and should be pretty beneficial against this type of stuff. If you want to set up your Volk Autoforge deck, you're probably going to be running 3 of these or 4 of these at the very least. The one disadvantage to it is that it does not do damage to sites, whereas a lot of the other red options do damage to sites. So taking burn out that damages stuff that like the Speaking Circle is potentially something that could be a little bit scary in the future. In any case, Flash Fry's really doing some good work, so very, very fun stuff. Okay, so we have covered the 5 in the cycle. We also have some cool spells available, and I believe one other card that has just recently been spoiled, which we'll be talking about as well, Midchief Salas. But first things first, let's talk about this colorless nonsense, Might of the Bastion. Might of the Bastion, okay. Everything is not coming up when we tell it to come up. Might of the Bastion is 4 cost. If you have a Grenadin, deal 3 damage. If you have a Mandrake, draw a card. If you have a Sentinel, play a random power card from your deck. If you have a Soldier, your units get +1/+1. And if you have a Valkyrie, gain 5 armor. So, couple of different things this card does. Notably, if you have a Grenadin, this card can deal damage to sites, which, hey, that's pretty neat. If you have a Mandrake, this card is card advantage, but also you probably have to have other things going on. There is a Grenadin/Mandrake, so you can pretty easily get something interesting out of that. There are not that many Sentinel Soldiers or Soldier Valkyries, so it's a little harder to get other hybrid type setups in these formats. Like, I don't think there's a Sentinel Grenadin. There may be one. And like Soldier Grenadin, Soldier Mandrake, there's not that many other like hybrid cards that really get that kind of value out of things. But if you have all of the tribes, then obviously you have access to something that's going to be pretty powerful. You get to deal some damage, draw an extra card, get a random power card, which is sort of equivalent to drawing an extra card as well, and then also get like a +1/+1 bonus. The Valkyrie bonus is probably the worst of these. Gaining 5 armor for 4 is terrible, and doing it in a Valkyrie deck seems just completely unreasonable. Might of the Bastion most likely plays best in a deck that has Grenadins or Mandrakes in it, since A, the Grenadins already sort of buff spell damage, and B, the Mandrakes are already really happy to have like card drawing going on. If you have like a Mandrake spell damage deck, that seems like something that's going to be really, really strong. In a Sentinel deck, I don't really see it being played too much unless you have like some Mandrakes to be playing along with it. We have played Soldier Mandrakes previously. In fact, we have a Soldier Mandrake deck in blue, purple, and green that could play something like this, get the +1/+1 bonus, and get a card, but paying 4 for that ability is not amazing, so it probably wouldn't end up in that list as well. I think as a colorless card, this is pretty safe in power level. Even if you have all 5 tribes, you're not getting anything that's going to completely blow out the game. The Valkyrie are particularly interesting if you're trying to set up like cool warp shenanigans, but that's just not really how Valkyrie are primarily played in Expedition. All in all, I think this card is more interesting as like a draft card than a card in a promo format, because I just don't know if you're going to be playing it all that much in any particular like type of format. But if you can play it, if you do play a deck that happens to have a wide variety of interesting tribes and you're not actually playing a tribal deck, this is something that gives you a little bit of tribal power and allows you to sort of like play the best cards from each faction, while then like following up with a Might of the Bastion for a wide variety of interesting effects. But overall, you just need too much on board for the card to be worth it, and once you have that much on board, you should probably be winning the game anyways. So I think as far as this card goes, it's pretty like close to like D or F tier. It's very unlikely to be played a lot, but I can see it in particular in Grenadin Mandrake decks, since there is a Grenadin that is also a Mandrake. Okay, so last but not least, I could see this card at 3, honestly. It seems like it could very easily be at 3. So Smite is premier removal in green. This card's ridiculous. I think overall it might be stronger even than Vanquish, which has previously been like one of the stronger options in the like removal format. It's just always been a solid go-to choice for green as far as like damage dealing goes. Been pretty defining for green in terms of like what kind of stuff they do. They punish big units while also playing a bunch of their own like more evenly costed units. Smite is something where basically you can kill a unit with different strength and current health at a fast spell speed. So this is something that is really, really nice and aggressive. Like you get an insane amount of value out of it on just about a wide variety of different units. I think that is like really, really important to note because the card is just fast spell removal akin to Annihilate and can just wreck a wide variety of units, possibly even more units than Annihilate can wreck. Although I think there's a reasonable amount of monocolored stuff in most formats, so like both of these cards have like a similar target base where they can just hit a lot of different things. Unlike Annihilate, you can adjust the value of an opponent's unit's current health. So if you really need to trigger something with Smite, you can attack in with like a 1/5 or something like that and like deal a single damage to it. Suddenly a even unit is smiteable. If you have like torches or ping effects or relic weapons or anything that actually deals damage to the unit, you can then make it available to Smite as a result, similar to like trying to exhaust a unit so that you can kill it with an execute. At fast spell speed, this is kind of ridiculous. Like damage will definitely shift current health, so you can do a lot of different things to actually trigger the card on just about any unit that you would possibly like, and the card really behaves very well with relic weapons in general, so it's amazing relic weapon removal because it A, punishes units that have uneven stats, and B, allows you to like really, really bop something down even if you have to spend a relic weapon to do it. I think like there are still like 6/6 and 5/5 sentinels that might make like this card not as good, but it's got to be a very specific meta for this card not to be a 4 of in almost every Justice deck. Overall, I'm not a big fan of the design of this card. I really don't like Justice's sort of take on equality, where it often will sort of like default to very boring cards and go for like these even stat lines that are just really well balanced, and then like sort of like force that kind of like cards should not have text, cards should be even stats, both strength and health. Like that gets very, very weird when it actually manages to make an influence on the meta in a way that like those cards are actually really present. I think that like there are a couple of Justice cards that have done that previously, like Svetch's Sanctum and like Martyr's Chains, where you're just like basically just applying stats on top of things and not really doing anything that's like super interesting with like decision making as far as stuff goes, because you just sort of like don't have much going on with it. Smite is that sort of like all-powerful Justice type card where technically it appears to be like reaching for balance, but the balance is like kind of a boring like sort of mid-game state. And you know, this is already the same thing where it's like the units with different strength and current health are usually the most interesting units, so punishing those in particular and making it more likely that you want to play something with even health and even strength means that you're likely to see a lot more flat units that have just like very simple basic trades and slightly less decision making as a result. So I'm not a big fan of this card in terms of like how pushed it is. I think it kind of pushes the meta in a weird place, but it is clearly a great card. It's clearly like just S tier removal. It's just disgustingly strong, and it's a solid contender for like the Annihilate slot in terms of best removal in Eternal, actually. So really, really strong stuff. Really, really good card. Really, really cheap to play, and altogether very, very solid. Last card was just recently spoiled, so we're going to talk about that as well, although maybe not as exciting as Smite, but we're going to talk about Mid-Chief Salas. Hello, Mid-Chief Salas is a 2-cost 3/2, I believe it's an Oni. Oni soldier with Quick Draw and Amplify 2, play Song of War. Song of War, if you don't know, is a 2-cost spell that gives every unit that you have Warcry. So 2-cost 3/2 Quick Draw, that is a really aggressive stat line and a very good one. 3/2 Quick Draws are, I believe, I don't know that there are any at the moment. There is a 3/1 Quick Draw, and it was a decent red aggressive option. At double red, this card is a little bit difficult to play, but I would say that overall, like, it's really, really well statted for its cost. So it makes a good aggressive option that you can definitely play around with. And it has a really, really nice soak, which is that when you are playing it and you don't have any other cards in your hand, you can play those amplifies to get extra Song of Wars on all of your aggressive units. So you're playing an aggressive unit, you're getting a Song of War so that your other aggressive units actually become relevant draws later in the game. That's very good. Like, if this card is the last card that you play and you just Warcry a bunch of your red aggro stuff, and then you don't quite get there with the cards that you were trying to attack your opponent with, like say you're putting your opponent at like 5 or something, and then they wrath the board, something along those lines, then now you have the option of drawing like a 5/4 quick draw out of the top of your deck, or a 5/4 charge out of the top of your deck, and just like swinging in and bashing them down. So like that sort of extra flexibility and late game presence is something that you definitely look for at least a few of in a red deck. And since the card is also a really nice aggressive option with the quick draw ability, and it has like that extra point of health, which does matter, as well as the relevant Oni text, I think this card plays in both Expedition and Throne formats. It's really good in Oni decks because it is just a really strong Oni, like as a great choice for any like sort of Kyoju decks that you want to be playing around with. If you're really interested in playing like cheap Oni lists, this is something that can really sort of support mono red for newer players and like allow like red green Rakano type stuff to really flourish in Throne. I think it's a good card in those particular circumstances. And an Expedition, yep, great card as well. There are certainly a lot of different cards that compete with this in Throne for that 2 slot, but I still think that the card actually provides enough unique different options, as well as a really nice late game presence, and both of those make it a shoe-in for both types of decks if you really want to play it. It's a perfectly worthy rare and a very good reason to purchase the set if you're looking for something to buy into, and you're also looking for a little bit of extra value to go with your Smites and your other cards that are going to be a little bit like more interesting. So yeah, power level wise, another nice strong card to push for the spikes and to push for the really aggressive decks and to push for the cheaper decks that just want to like buy a first campaign and figure out exactly what they're going to be looking for. This is something that really kind of pushes that particular level of design and pushes that type of meta. So expect to see some mid-Chief Salas. Again, Quick Draw, similar to Overwhelm, is not as useful in regen formats because Quick Draw does not prevent damage from getting dealt back if the unit has regen, but it's still a really strong option, and of course, like cards like Ruinous Burst, anything that actually does damage, can quickly turn that disadvantage into an advantage when people do non-profitable blocks. So it's still a really useful ability to have, and it's still a really useful stat line to have it too. The double red influence means that you're probably playing it in mono red as opposed to like red green, but if you have like a good painting setup or something like that, you're usually happy enough to play this card and get something cool out of it. So very, very solid stuff. All right. That's it for the spoiler breakdown. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. My name is Lico. My name is Pojo. We are we're having a very interesting night, but thank you so much for watching because it really does mean a lot. As always, you can find me on Patreon, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, all under Loco Pojo, Locopojo. See you next time. Have a good one.